Welcome to West Virginia Commonplace. I'm your host, JR, co-host Stacy. She's out and about in the world. She's doing what she normally does, working, traveling, whatever. The title of this episode is Death of the COVID-19 Podcaster. Somewhere around March 2020, podcasting took a huge boom. Everybody and anybody had a podcast. Probably heard some of the best podcasts in my life. Thus far from that time period. A lot of creativity because everybody was stuck inside. And, I can't tell you a person that didn't have a podcast, from famous people to the deli clerk that used to wrap up your meat at the grocery store. So, in hindsight, we look back at those podcasters and we see what has happened today. These podcasters have been misclassified as being PODfaded when it wasn't even them being PODfaded because they were just being trendy. They were doing something to pass the time. No harm in that because everybody does that. Heck, I even have done things just to pass time and then I don't go back to them. Greatest example for me has been certain video games. Certain video games will be trendy for a little bit of time. I'll play them and then they'll go into my video game museum and I'm done with them. Nothing more, nothing less to it. Just a simple trade-off. It was fun for the time. It's no longer fun anymore. But one thing that has occurred out of this instance is the severe drop of podcast. And I'll say from the time that I started back up podcasting heavily, which I was a late one to the race, was I came back in August of 2020. And when I came back, it was a fairly decent group of people. We were heading into the fall and winter and things were semi-opening back up. The world wasn't back to normal. So you had tons of podcasters. You had people that sat on Instagram day in and day out because everybody was experiencing that amazing growth of being able to be home for work. And it was a great experience. And then slowly from that point on into 2021, certain podcasts were dropping off. But now we're in 2022. And I want to say sometime around March or April, I started seeing a drastic change. More and more policies, the masks and everything were coming off, and people were, we had to get back to normal. There are still people that work from home, but a good part of the population had to go back into office. And then going back into office, you prioritize things different, and you truly see that podcasting was an outlet for the time. It was trendy, it was fun, so they walked away. And when they walked away, it did get misclassified. It got classified as these people PODfading when it wasn't even the case. So that's one thing that the gurus and everybody else, and even I'm guilty of being like, man, why did so many podcasts PODfade? But they didn't. It was just the death of the COVID-19 podcaster. And the death was fairly quick. As soon as spring of 2022 started, I watched in a week 40 podcasts that I had listened to in some form or fashion, not ones that I listened to every day, just disappeared. And heading into the summertime now, I have I tallied up over 200 podcasts from the time that I came back in 2020 till now have gone away. And it was like, at first I was like, man, what is really going on that these people can't prioritize time to do a podcast? Because heck, I'm finding time to do a podcast right now in between Stacey and I planning out our day for whatever we're going to do today. Quick little small mini episode. I'm not going to take too much time for this, but the thing that the pondering question will be, and then there will be some random book by NPR or someone in the near future. What happened to all these podcasters? Why did they come? Why did they leave? And that'll be questions that we'll ask forever and forever. Me, I won't ask that question at all because it was fine and simple. They came, they did what they needed to, they left. The ones that have stayed, kudos to you and applause to you. And anybody that's keeping your podcast strong and continuously going on with it, I know that it is a trying thing to do because you have to fit time in to do it. Me personally, I always talk about that 15 minutes in a day that you have that you can do something with your podcast. And even if you're just doing a solo episode like I'm doing right now, instead of interviewing someone or going back and forth with my co-host, so many ways to keep podcasting. But back to this whole aspect. And the reason that I called it the death of the COVID-19 podcaster is because the profile, the identity of these podcasters. If you follow their podcast from beginning to end, it's those characteristics sit there. They were very quick, brash. Some of them had great quality and production to it. So some of those things disguise the podcast from other podcasts, because like this one, we don't have intro or anything like that, except for if the mic gets hit, boom, or something like that. Like I always say, one of our trademarks. But the reason that it's a death is because as much growth as podcasting got from that, it's the decline that is happening now. This podcasting mode and mean is changing. There's more emphasis on more video than anything else. There's still going to always be audio because that's the purest form of podcasting to some, not to all. So I'm going to make that a very opinionated statement. But just like the whole landscape, like it used to be a time that Instagram and other places were the place to build your podcast, but now the major thing that's implied here is you better be on TikTok. And you better be on TikTok. And it's not like you don't have to be the strongest presence. You're going to get to the followers that you're due, but your presence has to be felt in that media. They need to know that you're there. They need to know that you care. That's where your engagement pools. It used to be an engagement of being on Twitter and Instagram that would make the listeners come to you. But now TikTok has made an age of quick second videos and lower attention span. But in that lower attention span, and one thing that I have to give away to this podcast now is when we don't post on TikTok and we don't do things with TikTok, I lose listeners. So the death of the COVID-19 podcaster is this. In that realm, all I had to do was post some stuff on Instagram or across Twitter or Facebook, and I was getting mad crazy listeners. Or we were getting mad crazy listeners. And now, it doesn't happen that way. I've got to post TikTok first, Reels. I have to get some type of video interaction out there. And my loyal listeners, yes, they keep listening. And the unique listeners that I keep listening. But to bring in new people each week, they're going to want to see a video. They want something that is entertaining, that will bring them to the forefront that, like, this person is human. This person is just not a voice on a radio show or podcast, whatever you want to call it. Just talking about a bunch of jargon about podcasting and about problems in the world, blah, 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 or society, culture stuff. This person's human. They go out, they act, they do activities, they embrace the world. So that's the kind of step that's happened now. And that was not the step when COVID-19 podcasters were out here. People were just talking about their life experience pre-pandemic and during pandemic. And now post-pandemic, that is the next rise of podcasting. People are going to talk about what happened during the pandemic, make a history lesson out of it. So real quick though, I want to thank you listeners. I want to thank everybody that listened to this very, very quick episode. It was just one of these things I wanted to throw out there because it had been a discussion that I had 2 or 3 times with a friend. I said, I do need to do a podcast about the death of the COVID-19 podcaster. So once again, the roundup is this: wvuncommonplace.com. Run over there, join the mailing list, like, subscribe, catch us on all social medias. We're active on Twitter, we're active on TikTok, we're definitely on Instagram, we're on Facebook every day of the week. Listen to us on Good Pods, listen to us on Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. And once again, thank you for allowing us to continue to podcast and to bring you some amazing episodes. This is JR signing off.